Totally watched. The most interesting on the internet.
Hello everyone again. My name is Jessica Clarkson and I welcome you to What If episode. Snow White was designed to fail by Totally Watched, Part 1. You may think you've heard everything there is to know about the Snow White movie, but let's make it more interesting. Expectations were high, so the film had received a lot of attention. First, we deep analyze in a unique way. Would the film have ever been a blockbuster? At least all the elements were there. The name, the story, the Disney company behind it all. What should have been different for the film to have been a success? Or would anything have helped? Was there a mechanism built into the film to ensure failure? Could it be that Disney shareholders want to get rid of the management team? This time, Peter won't tell us what people think of the Snow White movie because, as we know, the big-budget film became a complete flop. Negative attention is so crushing, IMDb only gives it a 1 of 10, perhaps the worst number ever for a film of this level. Next comes a deep analysis of the Snow White movie and its background that you've never heard of. Hold on to your apple, because here we go. Contrary to what it might seem at first glance, almost everything in a fairy tale is symbolic. But first, we're diving into the enchanting yet tumultuous world of Snow White, starting with the classic 1937 fairy tale. In the original 1937 animated film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, a beautiful young princess named Snow White is forced to flee her home when her jealous stepmother, the evil queen, orders her death. The queen, obsessed with being the fairest of them all, becomes enraged when her magic mirror reveals that Snow White has surpassed her beauty. Snow White finds refuge in the forest with 7 dwarfs who protect her from the queen's wrath. However, the queen ultimately tricks Snow White into eating a poisoned apple, causing her to fall into a deep sleep. She is eventually awakened by a prince's kiss, leading to a battle of good versus evil that ultimately ends in triumph for our heroine and to a happy ending. The evil queen is described as a proud and arrogant woman with exceptional beauty who marries the king following the death of his first wife, Queen and Snow White's mother. The stepmother was furious. She had always hated Snow White, and now she could not bear the thought of sharing the kingdom with her, so she commanded the huntsman to take Snow White deep into the woods, kill her, and bring her heart and lungs back to her. However, when the huntsman found Snow White, he couldn't bear to kill such a beautiful girl, so he let her go and brought the queen the heart and lungs of a wild animal. Snow White's mother, before her untimely death, wished for her daughter to possess beauty that mirrored her own, lips as red as blood, hair as black as ebony, and skin as white as snow. These qualities are not just superficial. These wishes symbolize beauty and purity, traits that Snow White embodies throughout the story. The mother's wishes set the stage for the conflict with the evil queen, queen's envy, and the queen's jealousy, as she herself possesses these traits but is corrupted by vanity. In the original story, the evil queen's jealousy of Snow White stems from her obsession with beauty and power, and her fear of losing her status as the fairest. This rivalry is central to the story, as it drives the queen's malicious actions. The queen learns from the magic mirror that Snow White is now the fairest of them all. This infuriates the queen, and she wants Snow White dead. But in the 2025 Snow White movie, the magic mirror says something completely different. It says that Snow White is the fairest of them all, but the queen knows this already. She checks the mirror every day and knows she's the fairest. So why is she suddenly angry? What's the point of her being jealous of Snow White? After all, the wicked queen is older, and we can assume that Snow White's mother was also older. Why is the young girl threatening the older woman? If the wicked queen were younger, it might make sense. So this is probably what they wanted to convey, but they failed because Snow White looks like an adult woman. But one of the bigger reasons why the movie failed was the decision to cast Gal Gadot as the evil queen. From the moment this casting was announced, it was met with widespread criticism and mockery online, and rightfully so. If we quote a review from a well-known publication, it says, "The decision to cast the stunningly beautiful Gal Gadot as the wicked queen is so bizarre that it's impossible not to laugh. The idea that such a conventionally attractive woman would be threatened by the beauty of a young girl is absurd and, frankly, hilarious." Casting Gal Gadot, a stunning actress, as the queen raises indeed eyebrows. It's hard to believe that someone as beautiful as Gadot would feel threatened by a child or anybody with an ordinary appearance. Her stunning appearance makes it implausible that she would be envious of Snow White. In addition, the original fairy tale was about symbolism, power, and vanity, which have been forgotten in the new version, and the whole setting is incomprehensible. What makes Gal Gadot such a bad choice for the role of the evil queen, in addition to looks? It is the nature of the character itself. The evil queen is not your typical Disney villain. She isn't evil for the sake of being evil, but rather she is driven by a deep-seated insecurity and fear of losing her beauty. She is consumed with her own vanity and becomes obsessed with the idea that Snow White is more beautiful than her. This is what drives her to seek out the magic mirror and ultimately leads to her downfall. If we take a look at Gal Gadot, we see a woman who is objectively beautiful by conventional standards. She is tall, slender, with long, flowing locks of hair and perfect features. In short, she is everything that the evil queen is not. And here's the problem. When you cast someone as beautiful as Gal Gadot in the role of the evil queen, you run the risk of undermining the character's motivations. How can we believe that this woman, who is clearly the most beautiful person in the room, would be threatened by a young girl's beauty? It just doesn't make sense. To really sell the character of the evil queen, you need an actress who can embody the character's insecurities and fears. You need someone who can make us believe that she truly believes that she is losing her beauty and that she is desperate to regain it. Unfortunately, Gal Gadot is the complete opposite of this type of character. She is a woman who embodies beauty and confidence, which is why casting her in the role of the evil queen is such a disastrous decision. This all doesn't make sense, and the explanation for this is that they have changed the evil queen's motivation, making her jealous of Snow White's voice and not her beauty. Disney has completely changed the plot, which partly explains why the queen can be more beautiful, but at the same time changing the entire central plot so dramatically makes the entire film nonsensical. The big change in the story is that the evil queen wants to silence Snow White because she is jealous of her voice, not because she is jealous of her beauty. Again, this is wrong because the queen is jealous of Snow White's beauty, not her voice. If she were jealous of her voice, she wouldn't try to kill her. She would simply try to take away her voice. This idea sounds artificial because it is. What about the apple? In the original tale, the poisoned apple serves as the evil queen's ultimate weapon against Snow White. The infamous poisoned apple plays a pivotal element and role in the original tale, symbolizing temptation and the loss of innocence and representing the danger of vanity. In the 2025 Snow White adaptation, the apple doesn't kill Snow White anymore. Snow White isn't even poisoned accidentally. She knowingly eats the apple because the wicked queen enchants it herself. So, in the 2025 movie, the apple plays no role whatsoever. Why was it even there? The apple's significance role is diminished, overshadowed by a convoluted plot that strays far from the source material, as the film attempts to modernize the story by downplaying traditional elements of danger and enchantment, which ultimately undermines the fairy tale's core themes. So this crucial element is diluted, losing its significance and impact. Critics argue that this change strips away the story of its core themes, the depth and meaning that made the original story resonate with audiences, leading to a lackluster retelling. So the apple's role is completely ruined in the 2025 Snow White movie. If the queen's character has been made strange, the prince's character is downright meaningless. They have also changed the prince's character, making him fall in love with Snow White's voice. The prince is only interested in Snow White's voice, not in her as a person. This is also wrong because the prince loves Snow White as a person. He does not fall in love with her because of her voice. If he did, he would not marry her. He would simply keep her as a trophy. The entire falling in love has been practically removed from the plot and replaced with the prince's infatuation with the princess's singing voice, at the same time making the plot even stranger. If the goal is to avoid falling in love with looks, is falling in love with just a voice any more justified? Doesn't that objectify a person even more? And besides, isn't a person as a whole made up of a multitude of superficial factors? Appearance, voice, habits, thoughts, opinions, and so on. Individually, they are superficial, but together they create who we are, right? One of the most controversial aspects of the 2025 film is the portrayal of the dwarfs. In the first place, the big change is that the seven dwarfs are not mentioned in the synopsis. They have eliminated the seven dwarfs from the story, which makes no sense, especially when the original 1937 animation film is called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Now the dwarves are called animated magical creatures. This is wrong because the seven dwarfs are an essential part of the story and cannot be removed. If they did, the story would make no sense, as the production aimed for an egalitarian approach that led to the exclusion of actors who were physically suited for the roles. Critics argue that this decision was absurd, as it discriminated against talented actors based on their physical characteristics, so now actors who were suitable for the role were discriminated against out of fear of discrimination. This is truly absurd. The notion that hiring short actors would offend them is seen as misguided, and many believe that their inclusion could have added authenticity to the film. And it's not just viewers' opinions. The most confused are the short professional actors themselves. In interviews, they have felt that they were subjected to the worst possible discrimination from Disney. Many had high expectations to be in a great film, where it would be a rare opportunity for short people to have a very significant and visible role. Also, there's another character in the original tale who doesn't appear in the movie. Do you remember the huntsman? He was a pivotal character. It was he who was supposed to kill Snow White, but he spared her life. The fact that the huntsman showed mercy led to the demise of the Wicked Queen. So, without the huntsman, the ending of the story changed. And then we arrive at Snow White. The striking difference between Ziegler and the original story is, well, Snow White herself. As we remember, the central point in the entire Snow White fairy tale is that Snow White's mother wished that Snow White's skin would be Snow White, like her mother herself. Rachel Zegler, on the other hand, is of Latina background and doesn't look anything like Snow White at all. This seems like an equally absurd way to avoid racism, just like the dwarves. Fair skin, or more accurately Snow White's skin, is what gives the fairy tale and the films made from it their names and the most important symbolism in the entire film. It's not about race at all, and therefore, through today's eyes, the ethnic discrimination against fair-skinned people in the 2025 movie and the changing of Snow White's performer to Latino seems ever more artificial. Consciously avoiding a certain skin color is racism in itself. And as we've already talked about symbolism, the symbolism of white in the fairy tale means pure and innocent. So in the 2025 version, this symbolism is completely torn away. In focusing on avoiding racism, the film production has completely lost touch with the reasons why certain elements of the fairy tale exist. And by changing these elements, it has destroyed the entire idea and message of the fairy tale. The producers claimed they were aiming for a fresh take, but it seems they missed the mark entirely. In the 2025 version, a completely new background has been invented for the name Snow White. Snow White has now survived the blizzard, and that's why she's called Snow White. Isn't that a bit silly? What do you think? And in addition to these, they have even changed the essence of Snow White by giving her a magical voice from birth, something that is a completely unnecessary addition. Rachel Zegler's portrayal of Snow White has also faced criticism and scrutiny, with critics pointing to her lack of depth in embodying the character's innocence and charm. She's a pretty girl, but this movie was her big screen debut, and she wasn't impressive. Her acting skills aren't strong enough to carry the entire movie. Plus, her singing voice doesn't sound like a child's, it sounds like an adult woman's. Perhaps the most confusing thing about Rachel Zegler has her comments and controversial statements. Her comments post-release have not helped her case. She wrote on Instagram that she hopes Trump voters and Trump himself will never know peace. She later apologized for what she had said. In addition, she made statements about Palestine that took attention away from the film itself, just when she should have been marketing the film. Zegler's comments about the film have otherwise demonstrated her and the production team's complete lack of understanding of the themes, symbolism, and lessons of the original film. Zegler states, "I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that's not going to be saved by the prince. And she's not going to be dreaming about true love." She added, "She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true." Zegler's comments on the original version of Snow White went viral, where she described the classic tale as outdated. She went ahead to call the prince in the story a guy who literally stalks her. The statement went like this: The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird. So we didn't do that this time. It's an inner journey that she goes on to find her true self, and she meets a lot of people along the way that make the journey interesting. However, her comments resulted in outrage among fans of the original film, who viewed her comments as disrespectful towards the classic tale and the legacy created by Disney. They argued that the actress's comments disregard the impact of the original Snow White film, which was loved by generations. What particularly angered the fans was her comparison of the prince to that of a stalker, but perhaps the worst comment was about the film itself and ethnicity. She said, "I really just want to tell great stories, and one of my truest beliefs that I hold on to very tight is that true representation comes when we simply get to exist in the world without having to necessarily acknowledge our heritage in the context of a story." With this sentence, she suggests that she doesn't think Snow White needs to be played by an actress who looks like Snow White. What's sad is that she shows that she has no idea about the numerous symbolic elements that made Snow White the Snow White, that the white in the movie is a symbol of purity and innocence. This was part one of a two-part in-depth analysis. In addition to the characters we've just discussed, we'll analyze what would have saved the film, or could anything have saved it? Casting, directing, and production perspectives, and we'll answer the question, was there a mechanism built into the film to ensure failure? Soon it is time for you to comment. Tell what you think in the comments. Your opinion is really important. It really matters. Maybe it will have an impact on things. And please also tell us in the comments what you want to hear in the future, instead just clicking the thumbs down button. That's much more useful, and it's the best way to tell us what you hope. And that way, we can deliver the content you want to see and hear. Please don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any new episodes. To see what people think in the future, or what would have happened if things were different, or something else interesting, hit the like button and click the bell icon and share it with your friends. That's the only way we can bring you this interesting news. The QR code at the end makes sharing easier. This video was made possible by Rexform Solutions. Better at being better. They are amazing for believing in of our cause. This is Jessica Clarkson. Thanks for watching the episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Now you can eat that apple. Don't worry, it's hardly poisoned. See you in the second part. Bye-bye.
Totally watch the most interesting on the internet, presented by Rexform Solutions.